the resources folder, there are 5 files that have been shared with you. We have the Titanic dataset, which is the train and the test data. We have the automobile MPG data. And then we also have a retail data for the retail transactions and the product files. The Titanic and the MPG data is some of the most common datasets that you work with as a data scientist. The train data that we have for Titanic has 891 records in it, where it tells us different things. It tells us the passenger ID, survived passenger class, name, sex, age, sibling and spouse, parent and children, ticket, fare, cabin and amount. If you want to read more about it, you can simply Google the Titanic dataset, and there are hundreds of examples available which use the Titanic dataset. The MPG dataset is also a very popular dataset for data science. This dataset has different details. So if you look carefully at the heading, we have the miles per gallon, the cylinders, the displacement, the horsepower, the weight, acceleration, the model, the year and the car name. We will be working with this dataset a little later. Alright, so we come back to 9 and we will be creating a new workflow. So click in the top left corner and insert a new 9 workflow. Now this creates a blank interface like this. The first thing that we want to do is to take our Titanic dataset. So we select our file reader. You can double click on it. And then in the file reader, we want to right click and configure, browse, and my folder is on my desktop. So I'm going to select resources and select the train dataset. This is the dataset that we have. One change that I would like you all to make is to change the passenger class to a string value. Why we are changing what looks like a number into a string is because the passenger class is not really a number. We don't want to find the average and the count, or rather the average and the median of the passenger class. Hence, we want to consider this as a string. Similarly, survived is 1 and 0, which should also not be an integer. It should be a string value, like this. Let's click on OK. The color is yellow, that means that we still have to execute it. Right click and execute it. It changes to green. And now I can click on File Table and it will show me the data like this. There are some missing values that you can identify by this red colored question mark. So in the age and in the cabin, we have some missing values. As you can see, there are 891 records that we have. And these are the 11 types of columns that we have. Let's also search for the Explorer. Now, you have different types of Explorer available, but 9 is now moving towards JavaScript. So whenever given an option, you should always prefer to use the JavaScript nodes available. So I will select the Data Explorer. As you can see, these are connected automatically. Now, if we double click on the Data Explorer, we have different options available here. At the bottom, we want to make the nominal values into 100. Now see, there is no magic number for this. How do you decide? You will have to try out different combinations to see the maximum number of nominal values. But let me first explain why we are doing this. If I execute and open views, you notice it gives us a nice window with some details about different columns that we have, like this. So we can see the min, max, mean, standard deviation, variance, skewness, kurtosis. And then in nominal, we can see survived passenger class name. And we can also see a simple frequency bar chart. But the problem is that there are so many names that it doesn't really make sense to consider this as a nominal value. The frequency bar chart does not really make a lot of sense here. And that is the reason we want to right click, configure, and change the number of nominal values into 100. That becomes the maximum number of nominal values. Let us again execute and open views. And this time you can see in nominal, not all the nominal values are calculated since there are more than 100 unique values in the name. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. Same for ticket and cabin. You can also see in the top right corner, it tells you that some nominal values were cut off by the number of unique nominal values, which is what we wanted. And you can also see the data preview here. Let us also look at our auto MPG dataset. So we can simply do a Control C and a Control V on the file reader. Let us configure, and this time I want to select my auto MPG dataset. Let's not make any changes for now. Let me execute it, and if we look at the file table, it will show us the data like this. We want to search for a scatter now. And again, if you notice, there are different types of scatter available. But if you remember what I told you, you would always prefer to choose JavaScript. So we select the scatter plot. And we can simply drag this arrow and connect it to scatter plot like this. Right click, configure, and in this we want to look at, let us say, our weight and our miles per gallon. Right click, execute and open views, and you can see the scatter chart like this. It's a nice looking scatter chart, and you can also make some changes to this. In the top right corner, you can, let's say, change the X to horsepower, and the scatter chart changes since the x-axis is the horsepower now. Let us try another type of visualization, and we want to try the box plot. Once again, we select the JavaScript box plot. Let's connect the file reader to the box plot. Right click, configure, and we will have the option to enforce exclusion and enforce inclusion. But before we do this, I want to make a small change. On the file reader, we want to change the cylinder from an integer to a string. Now, even though the cylinder is looking like a number, which is 864, it does not really make sense because there would not be an infinite number of cylinders. So for now, we want to convert it into a string like this. Let me execute it. And then on the box plot, we will configure it. And here in the left side, we want to keep everything. And in the right side, we just want to keep our miles per gallon like this. In fact, let me make a small change. Let's not look at the box plot. Let us look at the conditional box plot. This would be better for example. So we connect the file reader to the conditional box plot. Let's configure it. And since we have made the cylinder as a string value, you can see the cylinder here in the category column. If you cannot see this, it means that you have not declared the cylinder as a string value. Let's put everything on the left side. And then on the right side, we just want to keep our miles per gallon like this. And the selected column will also be miles per gallon. Let's press OK and right click and execute and open views. And now this will show us our box plot like this. Box plot is a very popular and an excellent way of presenting data. If you're not aware of how to interpret a box plot, I would suggest to go online and just read any good article on the box plot. The basic idea is that this orange column is telling us that 50% of the values are between this range, 25 and 33. And then this is the min and the max. And then these are the outliers that we see. In the next example, we would look at the joiner node, which allows us to combine two different files.